Hi, Paracon Weather Meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Wednesday morning, June 16th. A lot to talk about this morning. We have really a split nation with very hot weather out in the western U.S. and very comfortable weather throughout much of the northeastern quadrant of the nation. That includes the Great Lakes, the Mid-Atlantic, and the northeastern U.S. We had a cold frontal passage a couple of nights ago here in the Mid-Atlantic region, and a secondary front has ushered in a reinforcing shot of very comfortable air. Brilliant sunshine today along the I-95 corridor. D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, refreshingly cool tonight with low temperatures way down in the 50s, even in the urban areas along the I-95 corridor region. Meanwhile, out in the west, some extreme heat, 115 degrees today for afternoon highs in Phoenix, Arizona, perhaps as high as 125 in Death Valley, California. Their all-time record high was 134 degrees more than 100 years ago. I believe it was 1913. So some extreme heat out in the west. And let's just kind of look at the big picture here as to what's going on now and what will unfold by the weekend over the Gulf of Mexico. We will most likely have a tropical storm, perhaps even some system that will reach hurricane status. It will be named Claudette, as Bill actually was a named storm for a brief time yesterday in the western part of the Atlantic. So anything that forms over the next 48 hours or so in the Gulf of Mexico, if it reached tropical storm status, would be Claudette. First of all, for now, very large high pressure situated over the four corners throughout many, many layers of the atmosphere. And this is producing the extreme heat, not only across the more usual places, New Mexico, Arizona, California, but really all the way up to the U.S.-Canadian border. Montana experienced some hot weather as well. Meanwhile, over the northeast, and we'll see all this on the 500 millibar height maps shortly here, but a deep upper level low situated right here over the northern part of New England, southeastern part of Canada, and that has ushered in some very, very comfortable air into the Mid-Atlantic, New England, Great Lakes region. Meanwhile, we will have tropical storm development over the next 24 to 48 hours or so right in this region. Looks like it'll head right to the central Gulf. So anybody in the area from northeastern Texas across Louisiana into Mississippi, be on guard for this, what would become Claudette if it reaches tropical storm status. By the way, that is pretty high likelihood, perhaps even into a hurricane. After that, looks like the remains of Claudette will turn to the north and east. At the same time, another cold frontal system will be dropping south and east from Canada into the Midwest, Great Lakes, and ultimately into the Northeast. Depending on the interaction between the leftover remains of Claudette and this approaching frontal system will dictate how far to the north and east the rainfall can push, probably into the Carolinas, but perhaps even as far north as the Mid-Atlantic and the northeastern part of the nation. Again, we're talking about the remains of what likely to become Tropical Storm Claudette. And if it in fact makes it all the way up to the Mid-Atlantic region, northeast U.S., it would probably be in the Monday night, Tuesday time frame of next week. And all that will be followed by yet another very comfortable air mass by the middle of next week for the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic, and the Great Lakes. Now let's get to the finer details with computer forecast model map. Well, let's begin with the 500 millibar height anomaly maps using the operational run of the GFS. And here is that intense high pressure system. Again, it's really throughout the atmosphere, situated over the Four Corners region. Extreme heat out in the western states from Death Valley to Phoenix all the way up to Montana and North Dakota, well above normal conditions here. Meanwhile, the opposite in the northeast. We have deep upper level low situated over southeastern Canada. Very, very pleasant air for this time of the year. Whenever you get dew points down into the 40s in the middle of June, places like D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, you're really in for a treat because that doesn't happen all that often. Low temperatures tonight, even in the big cities along the I-95 corridor, will drop well down into the 50s. A refreshingly cool night on the way. Now let's push forward here and watch what happens. This pattern kind of sticks around for a little while, and again, I mentioned next week there'll be a repeat in the northeast with another refreshingly cool air mass coming in. Here's that high pressure still sitting over the Four Corners region, very high heights compared to normal. This is by tomorrow evening. Let's now move forward, and here we go. By Friday morning, we're seeing the reflection at 500 millibars of what likely to be Tropical Storm Claudette by the end of the week or the beginning of the upcoming week. And it looks like it'll push to the north right for the central Gulf Coast region. Let's say northeastern Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi. That is the area of concern here. But of course, all residents from Texas to Florida should be monitoring this situation over the next few days here. And let's move forward here. And here we have going through the upcoming week, and we have one wave in the upper part of the atmosphere moving across New England. But here we are by Sunday. Reflection of the tropical system by Sunday across the southeastern states. Here is yet another upper level system dropping out of Canada southeastward towards the Great Lakes and ultimately into the Mid-Atlantic region. It is the interaction between the leftover of Claudette and this approaching frontal system that will dictate how far north and east potential heavy rainfall can push next Monday, Tuesday time frame. Let's move forward here. There is a chance that it slides off the Virginia coastline. Also a chance that heavy rain extends all the way up into the northeastern part of the nation ahead of this approaching frontal system, and we'll just have to monitor that threat over the next few days here. And here we are by Monday of next week. Look at this upper level low situated over the western Great Lakes, and yet again another beautiful air mass for this time of year will push into the Great Lakes and northeastern part of the nation. Meanwhile, the west stays quite warm, perhaps not as hot as this week, but still generally ridging out in the west by the middle of next week and troughing across the Great Lakes and northeast. And here's that forecast map for next Wednesday morning, a week from today. Well, how does all this at the upper levels in terms of the height anomaly maps translate to temperatures down near the surface? This is actually the 850 millibar temperature anomaly pattern we'll look at here over the next 7 days or so. 850 millibars, a couple thousand feet off the ground level. Beautiful air mass, cooler than normal over the northeastern states, but they're suffering out in the west, really from the southwest all the way up to Montana and North Dakota, even into south central Canada. Now let's move forward here. It stays incredibly comfortable here in the Mid-Atlantic region for the next 48 to 72 hours or so. Probably highs remain in the 70s today and tomorrow in D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, finally moving back up into the 80s on Friday. Extreme heat out across the west, and it continues there for the next few days. And look at this, we have another cool shot coming into the Great Lakes region by the upcoming weekend, and at that time we'll be watching tropical system down over the Gulf of Mexico headed towards the northern central part of the Gulf later in the upcoming weekend. And again, we mentioned that there'll be an even stronger wave in the upper part of the atmosphere reaching the northern plains from Canada by the early part of next week. That will be have some very chilly air for this time of the year relative to normal across the northern plains, and that will be driving to the south and east, and it will interact ultimately with the remains of what very likely is to become Claudette here. And exactly how they interact with each other will dictate how far north and east the leftover rains of Claudette will extend early next week. We're talking maybe Monday, Tuesday time frame for the Mid-Atlantic, Northeast U.S. It seems very likely that the leftover remains of Claudette will reach the Carolinas, maybe in Virginia, but whether they make it all the way up to Pennsylvania and New York, let's say, still a little too early to say. Whatever happens Another very pleasant air mass pushes into the Great Lakes and Northeast U.S. by the middle part of next week. This is the Wednesday morning, a week from now, forecast map. Still above normal conditions out in much of the western states. Well, let's wrap up by looking at the surface forecast maps. Again, from the operational run of the GFS at 6C, high pressure, beautiful high pressure over the western Great Lakes, and the isobar pattern right here suggesting northerly flow, northwesterly flow across eastern Canada into New England, into the Mid-Atlantic region and the eastern Great Lakes. Very pleasant conditions. Here's some rain showing up already with that tropical wave down across the very southern part of the Gulf of Mexico. A thermal low. It's so hot out here, it's producing its own surface low pressure area across the southwestern states. Again, today, Death Valley could reach 125, Phoenix, maybe 115 degrees or so for afternoon highs. And then let's move forward here, and we have a couple things to watch. First of all, down over the Gulf of Mexico by Friday, here we have a low pressure area. Again, if it reaches tropical storm status, quite likely, I believe, it would become Claudette. Bill was used up yesterday with the wave off the eastern seaboard that pushed out to sea and has since weakened. Be on guard for this tropical system from Texas across Louisiana, Mississippi, perhaps all the way into Alabama as well. This is the Friday morning forecast map. That tropical system reaches the north central Gulf states by middle part of the upcoming weekend, and then starts to make a turn to the north and east. And here it is, the remains by Sunday here. Now we have that approaching next surface cold frontal system backed up by deep upper level low, and again the remains could look very likely to head into the Carolinas and perhaps Virginia. Exactly how much farther to the north and east, still a little bit too early to say, but it'll depend on the interaction between the remains of Claudette and an approaching cold frontal system. This is the Monday morning forecast map. Certainly on the table that a heavy rain event slides up from the Carolinas, Virginia, all the way up into Pennsylvania and New York, maybe even the eastern part of New England early next week, Monday night time frame. And then we push forward here, and whatever happens with the remains of Claudette, that incoming cold shot for this time of the year is coming from the northwest to the southeast. This is the Tuesday morning forecast map. Cooler air relative to normal. Certainly pushing into the Great Lakes, and ultimately by the middle part of next week, and here we are, the Wednesday morning forecast, another Canadian high drops into the Mid-Atlantic region with very pleasant conditions. A week from now, we're talking about Tuesday night and Wednesday of next week. So a lot going on. Extreme heat out in the west, very pleasant in the Great Lakes and Northeast, and we're watching the Gulf of Mexico for tropical storm development. If indeed it becomes a tropical storm, it would be named Claudette, very likely headed northward over the Friday, Saturday, Sunday time frame into Louisiana, Mississippi, eastern Texas, and then the remains of Claudette would likely take a turn to the north and east, affecting the Tennessee Valley, the southeast U.S., and perhaps all the way up into the Mid-Atlantic and northeast U.S. Monday night, Tuesday time frame. So that's it for now. For ParatonWeather.com, I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.